My name is Travis Scher. I work at a company here in New York called Digital Currency Group. We're one of the most prolific investors in blockchain companies in the world. And I'm here to talk to you about one project that we're especially excited about called Decentraland. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. I'm going to give you a little insights into our investment thesis and why we love it so much. So, briefly, for those of you who aren't familiar, what is Decentraland? So Decentraland is a user-owned, community-owned virtual world that's built on the Ethereum blockchain in a bunch of ways. So it has a native cryptocurrency called Mana, which is a ERC20 token. It's a fungible digital asset. More interestingly, the land in this virtual world is scarce, and it is divided into 90,000 parcels, each of which has different coordinates on the map, and thus these parcels are non-fungible digital assets whose ownership is recorded on the Ethereum blockchain. And people who buy and sell these tokens can then take the land that they own and develop on top of it. And they can create any sort of experience that you can imagine. They can create artistic experiences. They can create entertainment experiences. They can build games. They can build advertising experiences. So it's really a platform of sorts for all sorts of experiences. And initially, the game is gonna, the world is gonna be viewable on the web. After that, it's going to be viewable in mobile, and eventually it's going to be viewable in VR. So it's going to become much more interactive and immersive. Let's go to the next slide. Great. So why we think Decentraland is important. So the first thing is we are strong believers in this notion that virtual worlds are going to become much more popular. You can look at how much time people spend in social media today, how much time they spend on their phones today, how much time they spend in games like Fortnite today, and extrapolate into the future. And we think that the next generation is going to spend more time in these worlds that they can have many types of experiences, from gaming experiences to social experiences, etc. Next, we think that the prospect of one of the world's biggest tech companies owning this world is frightening in some respects. So you can look at all the controversy around Facebook in the last year with respect to how they treat their users and privacy and manipulative advertising and all that. And today they basically own a photo sharing website. So take that and apply all those same issues in a virtual world where a large chunk of humanity is spending a tremendous amount of their time. And so central control of this world it's likely to be a big problem. One of the things we love about Decentraland is that users can buy and sell the land, right? And so what this creates is the ability to make money by speculating on the land or by building a business or experience on top of the land, right? And this is only possible with NFTs. I don't think there's a non-blockchain solution to this where people can have true ownership of the world that they're helping to build. And as I mentioned earlier, the issue with, actually a memo recently came out where Mark Zuckerberg said in 2015 that Facebook wants to own the biggest VR or AR world that people are living in. So Decentraland is the antithesis of that. It's not only physically owned by its users, but it's going to be governed by its users. So the team today is already experimenting with basically community voting. They have a platform called Agora where the Mana holders, so the people who own the native cryptocurrency, can vote on some of the decisions with respect to the project's roadmap. And over time, the plan is for Decentraland to become a fully decentralized autonomous organization. It's a concept that has been a buzzword for a while that a lot of people talk about, but in this virtual world, it's actually a very relatable concept. So it's really just a city or a world that's governed by its citizens in the same way that, the US is. So what are people building in Decentraland today? So they're building games. I think some of the folks here today are building games for Decentraland. They're building businesses in Decentraland. So they're folks who are building virtual casinos and marketplaces and educational centers where they'll be able to charge money and on and on. they're building virtual communities. So one feature of this world is that it is divided into parcels, and some of the parcels are just pure private land that individuals can buy and sell on a marketplace. They also have these districts where people who had similar visions for what they wanted to build in the world could come together and say, you know, we want to build Dragon City, which is a sort of Chinatown in the world, or we want to build the University District, or we want to build Vegas City, or we want to build a marketplace district, and they're all kind of co-owners of different pieces of this world. So there's virtual communities that are being built today. And entertainment experiences. So at DCG, we've spoken to a ton of huge brands about, you know, what's happening in Decentraland, and many of them are really excited about the possibility of doing things like putting in sports experiences or VR-based concerts, or on and on. And advertising. So, you know, if as traffic picks up in Decentraland, there's going to be the possibility for people in the crypto space, or people who sell any sorts of products or services, to advertise in there as long as their target market is spending time in there. So here are some examples of some of the things people are building. There's racing games, there's a marketplace district, Vegas City, on and on. So I alluded to a bunch of this already, but a few more things behind our thesis. So we view this as an open platform for developers in the same way that Bitcoin and Ethereum are, in that there's a community of people who are excited about it. There's stakeholders in it via their ownership of crypto assets, and they have the freedom to build all sorts of stuff on top, which is truly exciting. It fuels network effects, and you know, really creates potential for massive growth. There's community governance, as I alluded to earlier. So what this means is that individuals who participate in this world are going to have much more freedom than they would in a world where, you know, Mark Zuckerberg can arbitrarily change the rules overnight, which is an issue we've seen with many of these social media platforms and businesses that are built on top. They don't really have the confidence that what they build is going to be able to exist in the future, and so it's prevented companies from building venture scale businesses on top of platforms like Facebook and Twitter. But in Decentraland, we think that's going to be possible. The token effect. So this is, you know, was a hot topic during the ICO boom, where people said, oh, you know, we'll sell off our tokens to a bunch of stakeholders, they'll become evangelists and developers, which will attract users, which will have this virtuous cycle. And it was a nice idea that just didn't apply to the vast majority of projects that launched, because they weren't legitimately exciting, and or there was no real potential for network effects, and so it hasn't worked with most. But with Decentraland, I think it is working at the earliest stages. There are thousands of diehard community members all over the world, and I think it's poised for tremendous growth. So another thing that we love about Decentraland is many of the ideas that people have talked about in blockchain over the world and been excited about haven't really come to fruition yet because of this last mile problem. So for example, people have talked about recording land ownership rights on the blockchain and putting title deeds on there. They've talked about using smart contracts for things like mortgages or leases. These are things that just don't exist in the real world today, because you have to connect these software programs to the real world, and there's all sorts of issues with that, but all these things are totally possible in Decentraland today. The other day I took out a mortgage on a piece of land on Decentraland that where the land is effectively collateralizing the mortgage, and if I don't make my mortgage payment, it reverts to the lender automatically with no last mile problem. So there's early experimentation with smart contracts and different sorts of property rights in Decentraland that I think will come before we see blockchain applications in the real world. And lastly, we think that this is, and relevant to this conference, we think that Decentraland is going to be likely the biggest marketplace for NFTs and virtual items in the crypto space, because it's a totally open platform where people can come in and discover experiences and interact. And so basically every NFT project in the space, I think, is experimenting with doing something in Decentraland, and I think totally new ones will emerge. So just on what DCG is doing. So we bought Mana. We participated in the initial token sale. We did very few of these things, but this was one of the few projects that got us excited. We bought land. We think there's tremendous potential for economic upside there. And we actually started a new brand to invest in companies that are building on top of Decentraland. So it's called Metaverse Ventures, similar to how in early days we invested in Bitcoin companies like Coinbase and BitPay and dozens of others, some of them that are no longer around, because we wanted to accelerate the development of that underlying network. We also saw potential returns for investing in companies on top. We see the same thing here, and so we've started making early investments. So with that, I think we're doing Q&A. If anybody has any questions. Sure. Yeah, so it's a really interesting question around is this going to be the only one, or are there going to be other popular virtual worlds? So I think that I think there will be more than one very popular virtual world in the same way there are more than one very popular video games. I do think there are tremendous network effects, so there are not going to be that many. I think that there are strong early mover advantages in a business like this because you build a community, you get network effects, and everybody who comes after you is kind of starting from zero. People can copy this, but without the community, it really has no value. Any others? Sure. Oh, what type? Coming in from the outside world or possibly growing up from within a super-powered technology sort of aggressive player? Yeah, so look, I think that how power is distributed within Decentraland is going to be really interesting to watch. I think that the right way to look at it is by looking at how power is distributed in the United States, for example. So we have a variety of checks and balances. We have certainly certain groups of people who are wealthier or control certain types of businesses or have different types of political power for various reasons who hold more sway than others. But overall, a balance is maintained to some extent where there's not one group that's in complete control of the country at any time. There's going to be a lot of interesting decisions with respect to how governance in this world is structured. And it's really, part of the reason we love this is it's going to be fascinating to watch it unfold. Do we have time? No, I'm being called off. Thank you all.